We've already gone through today the false claims that wind turbines are responsible for the power outages in Texas. That's not true. While some wind turbines did freeze, wind is responsible for a small portion of Texas energy, particularly at this time of year. The primary issue was frozen instruments at unprepared, not weatherproofed, nuclear, natural gas, and coal power plants, energy generation plants. Now, not only were we aware for a long time that you should be prepared for cold weather, even in parts of the country that typically don't have it, because that's what climate science models predict. Warming overall on the planet with increasingly erratic weather, individual weather events in different places. But 10 years ago, Texas had this issue. And there's a very interesting op-ed in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram out of Texas, which points out public and private sector leaders may try to say there's no way they could have been prepared for this. That's a line of bull that no Texan should accept. This is an op-ed from yesterday or today. In 2011, Texas had what is known as the epic storm that ruined the Super Bowl in Arlington. And agencies at all levels offered recommendations to address the problems that contributed to those outages. And that none of the recommendations, or not nearly enough, not a sufficient amount of the recommendations, were actually taken. This was compiled into a report a decade ago. The report was called Report on Outages and Curtailments During the Southwest Cold Weather Event of February 1 through 5, 2011, Causes and Recommendations. And that report pinpointed exactly where things went wrong, how to ensure that it didn't happen again in the future. Many of the measures that were recommended were not particularly expensive and they were not particularly difficult to implement, but they weren't done. So not only do we have lies being told now to cover the fact that this has nothing to do with wind farms, we also have the negligence of a decade to fix a lot of these issues. Other states have done this stuff. Like, it's not rocket science. It's climate science, I guess. It's really just basic engineering. Generators can be prepared for winter. A lot of this stuff relates to adequately insulating and in other ways maintaining different instruments at nuclear, natural gas, as well as coal plants. There was a list. I mean, look at the report. The report is not exactly exciting reading, but the report makes it clear what needs to be done. In some cases, it's valves. I mean, this is not important stuff. It actually reminded me of the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in the Gulf, where a $500,000, some kind of, I believe it was a gasket or a valve or something like that, a $500,000 modification, $500,000 to each of these drilling platforms, could have prevented what ultimately was, I mean, was it hundreds of millions? I don't even remember at this point for BP what the total damages were, the environmental damage, et cetera. This reminds me of that in many ways. Also, by the way, even since 2011, it's not like this happened in Texas in 2011 and then not for a decade, and then now it happened again and they opted not to do anything. This has actually happened to lesser degrees over the last decade, and Texas still didn't deal with it. So is anybody going to be held accountable? Someone should be. The party that's in charge in Texas is the party that claims to be about personal responsibility. We'll talk about one Texas mayor who resigned in the last few days after making some insane comments about so-called lazy Texans, the people that had lost power. I guess that's sort of personal responsibility, but there needs to be responsibility and accountability at a greater level here. I don't know that there's an appetite for it, but it's going to happen again. We have an immediate tragedy. We shouldn't ignore that. There are people lacking power right now. But once that's fixed, what is going to be done? Because this is a real problem, and it's one where solutions have been outlined. They've been sitting around. The Trump administration had the pandemic response playbook. They ignored it. These recommendations have been sitting around Texas for a decade, And now look at the tragedy that is taking place. So we'll continue telling the truth about the role of different types of energy in this. And if you've fallen for the Tucker Carlson, Greg Abbott, whoever else, Fox and Friends line of this is what happens under the Green New Deal and renewable energy, that's not true. But ultimately, someone has to be held accountable for this. Let me know who you think it should be. You can find me on Twitter at Pakman.